This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
Theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political
theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick.
From Washington, D.C., this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jessica Wehrman, and I'm a managing editor at CQ Roll Call, and this week I am filling the formidable and oversized shoes of Jason Dick, who is on sabbatical. Perhaps I'm actually filling in the Hawaiian shirt, who knows? In theory, we're just 2 short weeks away from the first significant break since Trump 2.0 began in January. I say in theory because President Trump has been urging Senate Majority Leader John Thune to keep the Senate in throughout the month of August, and God knows how that will all turn out. And also, it is incredibly hard to predict anything anymore. However, if past is prologue, the next 6 months will include more spending cuts, more of an upending of the federal government, more very long nights on Capitol Hill, and because this is Washington, D.C., more drama with a good share of it performative. So, how does that translate to the voter? I've already told you I'm loath to predict on some topics, but that's why we've got Nathan Gonzales here. We've invited Nathan, who's the editor of Inside Elections, on the podcast today. Inside Elections provides nonpartisan analysis of campaigns for Senate, House, Governor, and President. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Jess. And this is exciting because I've done this a couple of times with Jason, but it really needs a fresh voice. So it's time. It is time. You're being welcomed, hopefully with open arms and open ears out there.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. And this is interesting because we've actually been... You actually predate, knowing you predates my time here at CQ Roll Call. We started working together when I was covering Ohio, so we'll probably talk about Ohio a lot. I am a former Ohio political reporter for the tens of you who are listening today.
In Ohio, even though it's not quite a swing state, still relevant. Always manages to stay relevant, and we can talk about why it's relevant this cycle. But Ohio is always important. And I was just there. My family. We drove across. We were going to Grandma's house in Indiana, but we finally stopped at Cedar Point, so Ohio's 9th district, Sandusky, and
I love that you knew the district, Ohio.
Yeah. It's kind of my job to know it, but yeah, I mean Cedar Point. I am getting a little old. Some of the coasters were like, I don't have to do that, or some of them I was one and done. A couple of them, Steel Vengeance, I went to do a couple times.
A drop off. It was like the highest in the world or something like that. I haven't been to Cedar. Yeah.
Yeah, Millennium Force. That's how old last time I was at Cedar Point, Millennium Force was new. That was around the year 2000. Now they're celebrating the 25th anniversary. So.
Well, I feel like roller coasters are a good segue to covering sort of what we're talking about today, which is kind of what this chaos in Washington right now means. We've got this sort of week going on where we're trying to pass appropriations bills. President Trump is saying, you need to stay in through the month of August, which has generally been a sacrosanct time of vacation for all of the city, in part because it's brutally hot here. And I guess, last week we had some really late nights on the Hill. The week before we did. And I wonder, does any of this translate to the voters? Do they have any sense of sort of the sausage making that's going on, or are they just paying attention to the end product?
Well, I would say normal people probably aren't digesting a lot of news on their family vacation or taking kids to and from camp or whatever it might be. And so I'm hesitant to say that something happening in July and August of the year before the election is going to be at the top of voters' minds when we get to the election. But if some of the things that are happening fits into some of the bigger themes or umbrellas that we see in elections, then it could matter. For example, if there is an overarching sense that government is not working, or government is doing the wrong thing, or the country is headed in the wrong direction based on some of the decisions that are being made now, then that could benefit Democrats in this case, because Republicans are in control of government. They have the White House. They have both chambers of the legislature, of Congress. So again, I don't want to say that these are, can we say that these are both not extremely relevant or irrelevant, that there is a danger for Republicans, but when we get to the end, it's about results. And if these policies that they're implementing, if they get to voters and voters feel good when we get at the time of the election, then Republicans have a chance to hold on to everything. If voters feel like things aren't going well, then that's when that change argument starts to resonate better.
So I've actually been interviewing you since Barack Obama was president. It's long before I was at CQ Roll Call. I was probably in elementary school, now that I think of it. I actually recall a time when looking at this sort of rapidly diversifying demographic of the electorate, it was kind of hard to imagine an overwhelming GOP majority. But now it's hard to imagine Democrats finding their way out of the wild again. I mean, do you get that same sort of feeling?
Yeah, well, we do. We've been doing this long enough where I think we've declared the end of both parties at least once.
Yeah.
Prior to the time that you're talking about, I remember back in 2004 when Democrats lost to George W. Bush, and people think, oh my, that guy, he is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. How did Democrats lose to him? Democrats are never going to be in control again. And 2 years later, in the 2006 elections, there was a wave. Democrats won the House. They won the Senate. 2 years after that, Obama wins. And then we were in the situation that you're talking about where, like, oh, this is the new era of politics. Republicans will never be in control again. And then 2010 happens. The Republicans win 63 seats and they come roaring back. And so we kind of go through these, we have short-term memories when we need to remember that our politics are very cyclical. I don't believe in permanent coalitions or anything really permanent in politics. And right now, yes, Republicans had a very good 2024 election. There's some big questions about 2026. Specifically, is the Trump coalition transferable to other Republican candidates when he is not on the ballot? And I know Republicans are confident that there's been a change in the two parties, but I am less convinced. I want to see another couple elections when Trump isn't on the ballot.
So is it basically just sort of the elections that you're waiting for to kind of figure out where things are? Are you seeing polling data that's troubling to you or of interest to you that's sort of telling you?
Well, I mean, the polling data right now, one of the hot topics is there a divide in the Democratic Party or the MAGA movement between Trump and the base, or the Trump administration and the base, specifically over the Jeffrey Epstein situation documents. I don't know how deep we want to get into it, but yet the polling shows that Republicans are still firmly behind Trump. And we have gone through so many times of, oh, this is what's going to divide that base. And so I start as skeptical. Everyone can drink every time I say that. I'm start as skeptical that this will divide the base, but that doesn't mean Democrats can't do well. Meaning, if Democrats are energized in opposition to Trump and Republicans, if independent voters turn toward Democrats or against Republicans, then Democrats can do very well. It would help Democrats if there was a divided base and Republicans didn't turn out because they're apathetic or angry or upset. But that is not a requirement for Democrats to do well in 2026.
Are there independent voters anymore? Do they still exist? I mean,
well, there are. I believe there are a few, and independent voters might also be casual people who just aren't locked into politics on a regular basis. There are a large number of independent voters who say they're independent, but they still vote party line. They just don't want to be associated with one party. They want to be viewed as independent, even though their voting record is probably in line with one of the two major parties.
So you mentioned the Epstein stuff, and every political analyst seems to have this column at some point that says, oh, this is it with Trump. This is the thing that's going to be his downfall among his most loyal voters. This is the thing that turns him. So that Epstein is the latest version of this. Do you have any reason to believe that this is different, that this is the watermark? This is the shooting someone in the middle of, what is it, Fifth Avenue? I can't remember what street he
yeah.
But yeah.
I think that captured the essence of it. Well, I view it as, what does this frustration I think a tangible frustration that the base has with the administration right now and the president, what does that actually do? Does it mean, let's look at a couple options. Does it mean they're going to vote for Democrats? I don't think so. I don't think that they're that upset. Does it mean that they don't turn out? I think we talked about that was already a concern or a danger for Republicans. And so if this impacts the Republican base, their willingness or ability to turn out, then that could have a fundamental impact on the 2026 elections. And maybe it's kind of tough because if they're mad at Trump, but Trump's not on the ballot, do they still turn out? But I think if it feeds into a larger, they're all the same. Like I thought Trump and the Republicans were different, but they're all hiding something, or they all aren't being transparent or real with me or with the American people. If that leads to lower turnout on the Republican side, then that could have an impact. So I think that is more the danger rather than some sort of shift from Republican candidates to Democratic candidates. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
So we're like 6 months into this administration, and Republicans in Congress they've kind of given Trump everything or most of what he's asked for. I'm sure there's always an exception, but for the most part, if he's asked for something, he's gotten it from Republicans in Congress. But are these the things that voters want? I mean, when you talk to voters, do you get the sense that this is they're totally,
Well, that's what's really been fascinating, I think, is that Republicans, both the president and Republicans on the Hill, have been exuding extreme confidence in the last 6 months, right? They believe they have a mandate. They believe voters have sent them to do everything that they said that they were going to do. But when you look at the president's job approval rating, it tells a different story, right? He started slightly with his approval rating slightly higher, but now he's upside down or underwater, which is a very beltway term for his disapproval rating being higher than his approval rating. And so that tells me that, okay, Republicans say they have a mandate and they're doing all this stuff. And so far, voters aren't sold on it. They either don't like it or not convinced that it's going to help. And so it's going to be up to Republicans to either prove that those policies are effective and working and helping people, or it's going to be up to Republicans to talk about other things. And I'm sure they'll do that, right? They want to talk about the Democratic nominee in the New York City mayoral race, or they want to talk about any sort of other issues. So that the first 6 months, one of those big headlines is the contrast between the confidence of Republicans after 2024 with how those policies have affected President Trump's job approval rating. And I don't know. I know this isn't supposed to be a 3-hour podcast, but I think
that's the will of the listener. No, just kidding.
Where I think the Republicans and the president, they often start, I think, within the majority thinking in the country, and then they take it a couple steps too farther than where the public is. Let me give you a specific example. If you ask voters, should violent people who are in this country illegally be deported? Yes, you will get huge numbers. Yeah. If you say, should people, nonviolent criminals, but people who are illegally here, should they be deported? You'd still get some decent numbers. Then what if you say, well, people who had legal status, but revoked that legal status because it was in the Biden administration and deport them? You start losing people. Should there be sort of ICE running the streets? You just start losing people. And that's why specifically on immigration and deportation, the president's job approval numbers aren't good. And that is very different than the rhetoric you hear from Republicans who say, oh, Democrats are they're defending criminals, they're defending gang members. And it's like, well, it's fine to say that, but what the president is doing right now is not popular.
You could say the same thing, I think, with Medicaid, too. Like, oh, sure, no one likes waste, fraud, and abuse. Boo, waste, fraud, and abuse. But then when you're kicking someone off who's, a mom who works 3 jobs or whatever, it maybe the nuances are important.
And someone on the Hill must have been aware that the work requirements, which again, if you say, should people who are able to work, you'll get big numbers. But why was the work requirement put in to kick in, I believe, after the 2026 elections? It's like, well, that's, to me, there's not a lot of coincidence in Washington. And so I think that maybe Republicans will be able to avoid some of the consequences of those cuts because of the timing of the implementation. But it's remarkable that Republicans don't disagree that there will be cuts. It's just that they say, well, it's going to be cuts in people who shouldn't be eligible in the first place. It's like, okay, that's a fine argument to have, but as it's implemented, what does that look like? And I think it's going to be more complicated and messier than that.
I want to talk specifically about, because I mean, you're like a specialist in specific races. So let's talk about North Carolina. Tom Tillis decided not to run again. He is a little bit rebellious. He's not always as lockstep with the president as some of his compadres, and so he's decided not to run. What's that race looking like to you? We've got Laura Trump. We've got an interesting cast of characters.
Right. So I would put North Carolina in what is kind of being called the core four Senate races. You have North Carolina and Maine, two Republican states, two defenses on the Republican side, with now the open seat in North Carolina and Susan Collins in Maine. Then you have Georgia and Michigan on the Democratic side, where Senators John Ossoff, and then Michigan is open because Gary Peters is not running. That represents the core of the Senate battleground. North Carolina, so it was already competitive. I would say it's even more competitive now because it's an open seat. Some fascinating storylines are, with Tillis out, everyone is actually looking to President Trump to see who he will anoint in the primary, because right now having Trump's endorsement in the primary might be the most important thing to have.
It sure helped J.D. Vance, didn't it?
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, Vance was probably going to finish third, without help, outside help, particularly from Senator McConnell's super PAC at the time. But so Trump, right now, eyes are on Laura Trump, the president's daughter-in-law. She was born in Wilmington, went to NC State, but has not lived in North Carolina regularly in a long time. So she said recently that she's going to wait until Thanksgiving to make a decision. That's a little bit tricky that's a little tricky for a couple of reasons. One is that if she doesn't run, then that gives that's going to give Democrats probably a 5-6 month head start. It looks like Governor Roy Cooper is going to run on the Democratic side, and also, there is a residency requirement in North Carolina. She's actually going to have to reestablish residency by September in order to ahead of the December filing deadline. So things are a little fluid, but Republicans are at the mercy of Trump yet again. The Trumps, plural, the president and Laura Trump, because until she or he decides what they're doing, that freezes the race. No one who wants a future in the Republican Party wants to oppose or get in front of the Trumps. And so they're in a holding pattern.
Well, in Michigan, you've got somebody when we've talked in the past, you talked about a candidate where he actually kind of needs his vote, but it might be holding him back from an endorsement. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So because of the importance of that endorsement, Republicans would like the president to get more involved in some primaries to avoid primaries. And Michigan is a good example. So again, no incumbent. Democrats have a primary of their own between 3.5, 3/4 candidates. On the Republican side, former Congressman Mike Rogers, who lost narrowly to Alyssa Slotkin in the other seat last cycle, he is running again. But current Congressman Bill Huizenga is thinking about running, and he's not making it a secret. So Republicans are really trying to rally around Rogers in order to consolidate and have everything focused on the general election. But President Trump is reticent to endorse against sitting members of the House or sitting senators because he needs their vote. Like, he needs Huizenga's vote in the House because the House majority is so narrow. Or when you extrapolate this to what's going on in Texas, where Senator John Cornyn is in a very competitive primary with Attorney General Ken Paxton, or Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, who has had problems with the president before. If the president
independence, but not necessarily flex that independence.
Yeah. And it's the president is balancing, I think, exerting that influence in the primary, but also the realities of Capitol Hill and needing almost every single Republican vote that they have in order to pass anything significant. So
that's interesting to me, because I don't necessarily think of President Trump as being somebody who's like, sort of strategizing out what votes do I need? He kind of, it seems like, damn the torpedoes and here we go. But this makes it sound like he has to really think out all of these endorsements very specifically to get his legislative agenda passed.
Yeah, and he has people around him. I'm not sure that he personally cares or spend that, but I think he has people around him who are explaining that this is important. This is in your best interest, right? If you frame it as, oh, this is good for Republicans, or this is good for Bill Huizenga or Mike Rogers, like, I don't think Trump cares at all. But if you say this is in your interest, or in both from a legislative standpoint or keeping the Senate and the House for the years 3 and 4 of this term, then I think that starts to resonate with him more.
Okay, I want to finish on Ohio because God knows if I had a quarter for every time we've discussed Ohio, I would be retired and back on the beach. When we started talking years and years ago, it was Ohio was a swing state. It was so important. I wrote all these great stories about how it's super swing state and super important, and we had all these electoral votes, and now it's like super Trump land. Is it lost to Democrats forever? Is it, that whole stretch of eastern Ohio where Appalachia was, where the Steel Belt was, they're Republican now.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why it's relevant, particularly this cycle. Well, first, the House majority is so narrow for Republicans. Republicans just need a net gain of 3 seats in Ohio. Based on the new redistricting laws, they have to draw Republicans, because they're in control of the legislature, have to draw a new congressional map in Ohio before the next election. They might try to squeeze out or put themselves in position to gain at least 2 more seats. Marcy Kaptur in the 9th district she barely won re-election last cycle, and so they wouldn't have
hanging on. It's amazing. It's astonishing.
They wouldn't have to change that district maybe that much, but focusing on the Akron district where Amelia Sykes is running, trying to make her life more difficult. They might try to make the 1st district, which is the Cincinnati district with Greg Landsman. That one's a little bit tougher to change the lines, but anyway, because the House is so narrow, that Republicans getting a better opportunity in a seat or 2 could make a big difference. Then we talk about the Senate map. It has appointed Senator John Husted has to run in this election, and it's a good example of how difficult the path is for Democrats. Meaning, even if they happen to win those North Carolina and Maine races that we talked about earlier, that are not guarantees, Democrats still need 2 more seats. So do they go to Ohio or Florida or Texas or Iowa, whatever it might be? And we're talking about, and Democrats are waiting for former Senator Sherrod Brown. What is he going to do?
Yeah.
He just lost.
But he was doing his dignity of work thing. He didn't seem to be committed one way or the other. Have you spoken to him? Does he? What's your sense?
I don't know. My sense is he's trying to keep his options open. He's probably not anxious to jump right into another competitive race after losing a competitive race. So I don't know if you, you've been covering the senator for a long time. If anything in the past has given you inklings of, he has options. He could stay retired. He could run for governor. He could run for the Senate. What do you think? Well, if you had to bet, what do you think he would do?
Okay, let's keep in mind that this is someone who's been in the legislature. I'm not a young woman. He's been in at least the state legislature since he was a teenager and since I've been alive. So this is definitely a career for him, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. People say, "Oh, career politicians," and I dismiss that. This has been a life's work for him. So I think it's hard to cut, but he's home now. He's able to hang out with his grandkids. He's able to do the Dignity of Work Institute, which is this new think tank. So there is probably an appeal to that. Given the current environment, I think it's really hard. It would be really hard to run again. But this is also the one Democrat who's been able to consistently win in Ohio. So
right. Until he couldn't or didn't, right? That's
very diplomatic of me. I went on.
Well, it shows again where the difficult spot the Democrats are in, that they are waiting Like they're waiting for someone who just lost by 3+ points. Like it wasn't even really a barn burner. It wasn't a neck and neck race by the end. And so, okay, it would be a very serious race. If you have a former U.S. senator who's running, that's a very serious race. But he also has to prove that even though he's won in the past, he just lost. So what enough is different to elect him, elect a Democrat in Ohio?
There is something on that focus on workers' rights, and that sort of the thing about Trump that is appealing to that part of Ohio that was very steel mill and stuff is I think the populism. He very bellicose, kind of yelly, funny haircut. What is that? Oh, is it Jim Trafficant? No, it's Donald Trump. It's a very similar kind of. We love somebody who kind of talks like a populist, regardless of whether or not you actually are a populist. But I think that behind that, there are sort of these legitimate thoughts about workers' rights and whether or not they are able to, be able to have make a living, but with a blue collar job. And I think those concerns haven't gone away. So someone like a Sherrod Brown or even a Tim Ryan back in the day. Now he also was beaten on a statewide level. But I think that the language that they've used and that they've chosen might be on a long-term level appealing to at least sort of chip away at that overwhelming Trump MAGA support.
Yep. And I'll say again, I think it's about results, like that Republicans, Ohio has lined up clearly behind Republicans as of late. And do the Republicans that are in office, whether in Washington or at the state and local level, are they delivering? And if they don't deliver, if people still feel like, oh, no one's looking out for me, things
What's delivery look like? That's very important to know. Like what does delivering look like? Right. What satisfies a voter? What do they,
Right. And what do they shift to? Maybe the people that are in power do, deliver or fix one problem. Does that make the electorate satisfied, or do they just shift to a different problem? And who do they take out those grievances on? Is a big that's a big unknown question.
I love these guessing games because what happens is 12 months pass, we're up to the election, and then we're talking about a whole different set of issues. So anyway, I'm supposed to do a word of the day. This is what I have been told. I have a very strict directive, and I'm choosing this. This is topical, and people are going to know what it means, but it's relevant because this week, last night, Speaker Johnson said that we're only going to be voting because there's this Epstein standoff in the House Rules Committee. They're only going to be voting on suspension bills. What are suspension bills? My handy Congressional Quarterly American Congressional Dictionary tells me it's an expeditious procedure for passing relatively non-controversial or emergency measures by a 2/3 vote of those members voting, a quorum being present. Basically, this is what they're going to be voting on in the House this week because this whole Epstein standoff in Rules Committee. So we're naming some post offices, sounds like.
I saw that. We're getting new zip codes. Like some people are getting new zip codes. That seems like a big deal.
I do feel like that is a big deal. I'm glad that we agree on that. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for talking to me about politics. I love it. I hope that this is was as fun for you as it was for me.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And I won't tell Jason the next time I'm on with him that this was way more fun. This is way better.
Don't tell him I made fun of his Hawaiian shirt either.
There you go. I'm sure no one's recording this at all. So it's fine.
Exactly. It's fine. Bring it here.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Take care.